The camera would find her there, in that cramped Manhattan apartment, hunched over a battered piano at 3 in the morning. Fiona Apple McAfee Maggart, 18 years old, her fingers dancing across keys that had seen better days, pouring her wounded soul into melodies that would soon shake the world. The year was 1995, and she was about to become the voice of a generation she never asked to represent. In the amber glow of a single lamp, surrounded by scattered sheet music and empty coffee cups, she was crafting songs that would make grown men weep and teenage girls feel understood for the first time in their lives. But this story begins long before that pivotal night, in the gilded corridors of privilege that couldn't protect a little girl from the darkness that would both destroy and define her. Born on September 13, 1977 in New York City, Fiona Apple entered a world that seemed destined for artistic greatness. Her father, Brandon Maggart, was a cabaret singer and actor whose voice had graced Broadway stages. Her mother, Diane McAfee, was a former dancer who had traded spotlights for motherhood. The family's Upper West Side apartment buzzed with creative energy, filled with the sounds of jazz records and heated discussions about art that lasted deep into the night. Music was like breathing in our house, her sister Amber would later recall. Fiona didn't choose it, it chose her. Even as a toddler, Fiona would climb onto the piano bench, her tiny fingers searching for melodies that seemed to pour from somewhere ancient and unknowable. Her parents watched with a mixture of pride and concern as their youngest child disappeared into worlds of sound and emotion that seemed far too complex for someone so small. The idyllic facade cracked when Fiona was 4 years old. Her parents' marriage, strained by the pressures of artistic ambition and financial uncertainty, finally shattered. The divorce was messy, emotional, and deeply traumatic for both Fiona and her older sister. She became this tiny adult overnight, Diane McAfee would later confide to friends. She started taking care of everyone else's feelings before she'd learned to process her own. The family relocated to Los Angeles, where Diane hoped to rebuild their lives in the California sunshine. But for Fiona, the move felt like exile. She was a New York soul trapped in a Los Angeles body, and the displacement would echo through her music for decades to come. At Venice High School, she was the pale, intense girl who sat alone at lunch, scribbling lyrics in worn notebooks while her classmates discussed weekend parties and shopping trips. It was during these formative years that tragedy struck with devastating precision. At 12 years old, Fiona experienced a sexual assault that would fracture her sense of safety forever. The details remain private, protected by the silence she's maintained around the incident, but the impact reverberated through every song she would ever write. Something broke in her that day, a family friend would later observe. But from those broken pieces, she built something extraordinary. The assault triggered a spiral of self-harm and disordered eating that would plague her for years. Food became the enemy she could control when everything else felt chaotic and dangerous. Her weight dropped to alarming levels, and concerned teachers began calling home. But Fiona had discovered that pain could be transformed into something beautiful when filtered through music. She wrote her first serious song at 14, a haunting melody called Sullen Girl that would later appear on her debut album. She would disappear into the music room for hours, remembered her high school music teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. When she emerged, you could see she'd been crying, but there was this light in her eyes, like she'd found something precious in all that darkness. The breakthrough came through the most ordinary of circumstances. In 1994, 17-year-old Fiona recorded a 3-song demo tape as a Christmas gift for her father. The recording was raw, unpolished, and utterly mesmerizing. Her father, recognizing something extraordinary in his daughter's voice, passed the tape to a friend who worked in the music industry. That friend passed it to another friend, who passed it to a record executive at Clean Slate Records. Within weeks, Fiona found herself sitting across from music industry veterans who spoke in numbers and percentages while she clutched her notebook of lyrics like a shield. She was so young, so vulnerable, recalled Andy Slater, the producer who would guide her first album. But when she started singing, the room went completely silent. You could hear people's hearts breaking. The recording of Tidal was both triumph and trial. Fiona, barely 18 and thrust into professional studios with seasoned musicians, struggled with perfectionism and crippling self-doubt. She would record vocal takes dozens of times, never satisfied with the emotion she was capturing. She was chasing something none of us could hear, bassist Joel Shearer remembered. But when she finally found it, we all knew we were witnessing something special. Tidal was released in July 1996 to a music world unprepared for such raw emotional honesty. The album's centerpiece, Criminal, was a sultry confession that showcased Fiona's remarkable vocal range and unflinching lyrical honesty. Radio programmers initially hesitated to play songs about rape, self-harm, and emotional abuse, but audiences demanded more. The album climbed the charts with unstoppable momentum, eventually selling over 3 million copies. But it was the music video for Criminal that transformed Fiona from rising star to cultural lightning rod. Directed by Stephanie Sednaoui, the video featured 19-year-old Fiona in various states of undress, writhing seductively in underwear that barely contained her skeletal frame. The imagery was simultaneously empowering and deeply troubling, a young woman taking ownership of her sexuality while clearly struggling with serious health issues. "I looked like a skeleton," Fiona would later reflect, "but at the time, I thought I looked fat." The video sparked national conversations about body image, female sexuality, and the exploitation of young artists. Feminist critics argued that Fiona was reclaiming her power through sexuality, while others worried that a clearly unwell teenager was being packaged for male consumption. The controversy reached its peak at the 1997 MTV Video Music Awards, where Fiona won the Best New Artist award. Her acceptance speech, delivered in a breathless rush of emotion, became instantly infamous. "This world is bull's," she declared to a stunned audience. "You shouldn't model your life about what you think that we think is cool and what we're wearing and what we're saying and everything. Go with yourself." The speech was simultaneously praised as authentic and criticized as pretentious. Comedy shows mocked her earnest delivery, while young fans embraced her message of authenticity over artifice. "She said what we were all thinking," remembered Sarah Michelle Gellar, who presented the award that night. "But she had the courage to say it on national television." The backlash was swift and merciless. Late-night comedians crafted jokes around her seriousness, magazines published unflattering photos, and industry insiders whispered about her being difficult and unstable. For someone already struggling with mental health issues, the public ridicule was devastating. Fiona retreated from the spotlight, spending months in therapy and working to repair her relationship with food and her own body. Her romantic life during this period was equally complicated and public. Her relationship with magician David Blaine captured tabloid attention, the pale musician and the mysterious performer seeming like an unlikely but compelling match. They understood each other's need for privacy, a mutual friend observed. But they were both dealing with their own demons. The relationship lasted 2 years, ending when Fiona realized she was sacrificing her artistic integrity for someone else's comfort. More significant was her long-term relationship with writer Paul Thomas Anderson, director of Magnolia and There Will Be Blood. The two artists found in each other kindred spirits obsessed with perfection and authenticity. Anderson understood Fiona's creative process, supporting her through the grueling creation of her second album. Paul saw the artist before he saw the woman, Fiona would later reflect. That was both a blessing and a curse. Their relationship lasted 6 years, ending just as Fiona's career reached new creative heights. The breakup inspired some of her most devastating songs, including tracks that wouldn't see release for years. She wrote her way through the heartbreak, recalled her longtime friend and collaborator John Bryan. Every tear became a note, every sleepless night became a verse. The creation of When the Pawn marked Fiona's emergence as a true artistic force. The album's full title, When the pawn hits the conflicts, he thinks like a king, what he knows, throws the blows. When he goes to the fight and he'll win the whole thing. For he enters the ring, there's no body to batter when your mind is your might. So when you go solo, you hold your own hand and remember that depth is the greatest of heights. And if you know where you stand, then you know where to land, and if you fall, it won't matter, 'cause you'll know that you're right. Was inspired by a letter from a fan and stands as the longest album title in music history. The album showcased Fiona's growth as both vocalist and songwriter. Her voice had deepened, gaining power and control, while her lyrics became even more psychologically complex. Songs like Paper Bag and Fast as You Can demonstrated her ability to transform personal pain into universal truth. Critics praised the album's sophistication, but commercial success proved elusive. The music was too complex for mainstream radio, too emotional for casual listening. She was making art for art's sake, reflected music critic Robert Hilburn. In an industry obsessed with hits and demographics, Fiona was writing symphonies for broken hearts. The album's commercial disappointment stung, but it established Fiona as an artist's artist, someone respected by peers even when ignored by the masses. Her perfectionism became legendary and problematic. Recording sessions for her third album, Extraordinary Machine, stretched across years, with Fiona scrapping completed songs if they didn't meet her impossible standards. She would rewrite lyrics at 3 in the morning, remembered engineer Chad Blake. We'd think we had the perfect take, and she'd want to start over, because she'd thought of a better way to express one emotion. The album's troubled creation became the stuff of industry legend. Initial producer John Bryan crafted lush, orchestral arrangements that complemented Fiona's increasingly sophisticated songwriting. But Fiona grew dissatisfied with the direction, feeling the production was too polished for the raw emotions she was expressing. She scrapped the entire album, starting over with producer Mike Elizondo. The decision devastated everyone involved. It was like watching someone burn down a beautiful house because they didn't like the wallpaper, Bryan would later observe. The original recordings leaked online, sparking a fan campaign demanding the album's release. Websites dedicated to Free Fiona emerged, with supporters arguing that her record label was holding back a masterpiece. When Extraordinary Machine finally emerged in 2005, it was worth the wait. The album showcased Fiona at her most musically adventurous, incorporating elements of jazz, folk, and experimental pop. Songs like the title track and Oh Sailor demonstrated her ability to craft complex narratives within deceptively simple melodies. The album earned critical acclaim and Grammy nominations, proving that Fiona's artistic vision was stronger than industry expectations. But success came at a personal cost. The years of perfectionism and self-imposed isolation had taken their toll. Fiona struggled with agoraphobia, finding it increasingly difficult to perform live or engage with the media. She would spend months at a time in her Venice Beach home, venturing out only for therapy appointments and visits to the recording studio. She became a ghost of herself, worried her sister Amber. The music kept her alive, but it was also consuming her. Fiona's relationships suffered as she poured all her emotional energy into her art. Friends described feeling shut out, unable to compete with the songs that seemed to understand her better than any human could. Her battles with mental health became more public as she aged. A 2012 incident where she was arrested for marijuana possession revealed the extent of her anxiety issues. In a vulnerable interview, she described panic attacks so severe that she would hide in closets during recording sessions. "My brain is both my greatest gift and my worst enemy," she admitted. "It creates these beautiful songs, but it also tortures me with thoughts I can't control." The release of The Idler Wheel in 2012 marked another artistic triumph. The album, with its characteristically long, full title, was Fiona's most stripped-down work yet. Recorded mostly with just piano and voice, it showcased the raw power that had made her famous while demonstrating decades of artistic growth. Songs like Every Single Night and Daredevil were immediate classics, praised by critics and embraced by fans who had waited 7 years for new material. But even as critics hailed her return, Fiona was already retreating again. Touring remained difficult. Live performances became increasingly rare, and interviews grew shorter and more guarded. She seemed to be disappearing even as her legend grew. The years between albums stretched longer, punctuated by cryptic social media posts and occasional collaborations with other artists. Fans learned to read between the lines of her rare public statements, searching for clues about her mental state and creative progress. When she did appear in public, she seemed simultaneously more confident and more fragile than ever. Her relationship with her own fame remained complicated and painful. "I never wanted to be famous," she confessed in a rare interview. "I just wanted to make music that mattered." But fame is this monster that follows you everywhere, commenting on everything you do. The parasitic nature of celebrity culture particularly disturbed someone who had always guarded her privacy fiercely. In 2020, Fetch the Bolt Cutters emerged as if from another dimension. Created entirely in her Venice Beach home during months of isolation, the album was unlike anything in her catalog. Recorded with found objects and improvised instruments, it sounded like the product of someone finally, fully comfortable with their own artistic voice. The album earned universal critical acclaim, with many reviewers calling it a masterpiece. She had finally stopped trying to please anyone but herself, observed longtime fan and critic Ann Powers. The result was the most honest, most purely Fiona Apple album yet. The record swept year-end lists, earned Grammy nominations, and introduced Fiona to a new generation of fans who discovered her through streaming platforms and social media. Yet even this triumph came with complications. Fiona struggled with the attention, uncomfortable with praise that felt disconnected from the pain that had created the music. In interviews, she seemed simultaneously proud of her work and exhausted by the effort required to explain it to others. Her advocacy for social justice became more prominent as she aged, using her platform to support causes close to her heart. She donated proceeds from her music to animal rights organizations, spoke out against police brutality, and used her rare public appearances to highlight issues often ignored by mainstream media. "My privilege comes with responsibility," she explained. "If people are going to listen to me, I better have something worthwhile to say." The COVID-19 pandemic found Fiona exactly where she preferred to be, alone at home with her dogs and her piano. While other artists struggled with isolation, she thrived in the solitude that had always fueled her creativity. She posted occasional videos of her dogs, shared recipes, and offered glimpses into the domestic life that had always been her refuge from public scrutiny. But health issues began mounting. Chronic pain, anxiety disorders, and the physical toll of decades of eating disorders created a fragile existence. Friends worried about her increasing isolation, her reluctance to seek medical help, and her tendency to disappear for weeks at a time. "She's always been her own worst enemy," sighed a longtime friend. "But now she's too stubborn to let anyone help her fight that battle." The music industry has changed dramatically since Fiona's debut, but her influence remains undeniable. Artists from Billie Eilish to Phoebe Bridgers cite her as inspiration, praising her unflinching honesty and artistic integrity. Young musicians study her vocal techniques, her songwriting structure, and her ability to transform personal pain into universal truth. "She taught us that vulnerability could be strength," reflects singer-songwriter Julian Baker. "Before Fiona, female artists were expected to be either innocent or sexy. She showed us we could be complicated, difficult, and still make beautiful art." Her legacy extends beyond music into broader conversations about mental health, eating disorders, and female autonomy. Her early videos and interviews, once criticized as pretentious, are now studied as early examples of a young woman refusing to be commodified by an industry designed to consume female artists. The myth of Fiona Apple continues to grow even as the woman herself remains elusive. Fans dissect her lyrics like sacred texts, searching for clues about her emotional state and creative process. Her rare public appearances are analyzed frame by frame, every gesture interpreted as either cause for celebration or concern. But perhaps the greatest testament to her impact is the silence itself. In an age of constant communication and relentless self-promotion, Fiona Apple has maintained the radical position that artists don't owe the public access to their private lives. Her absence from social media, her reluctance to tour, and her refusal to explain her art all serve as quiet rebellion against celebrity culture's demands. She remains, at 46, exactly what she was at 18, an artist first, a person second, and a celebrity only by accident. In her Venice Beach home, surrounded by rescue dogs and vintage recording equipment, she continues to craft songs that matter more than their commercial success. The world may hunger for more access, more explanation, more of everything. But Fiona Apple gives only what serves the music. And in that fierce protection of her artistic integrity, in that stubborn refusal to be anything other than exactly who she is, lies the true power of her legacy. She never saved the world, never solved anyone else's problems, never became the spokesperson a generation tried to make her. Instead, she did something more valuable. She remained authentic in a world designed to strip authenticity away, one song at a time. The piano in her living room still holds the ghost of that 18-year-old girl, pouring her heart into melodies at 3 a.m. The difference now is that she's learned to love the darkness as much as the light, to embrace the complications that make her human. In a culture obsessed with simple narratives and easy answers, Fiona Apple remains beautifully, stubbornly, and eternally complex. Her story continues to unfold in private moments, in songs yet to be written, in the quiet spaces between public appearances. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be. The mystery preserved, the woman protected, and the music speaking louder than any explanation ever could. In the end, the songs are all we need, and the songs, thankfully, are enough.